That's the problem. You're the distraction. We ain't had a hit since you've been around. Stop talking.
What began as a fictitious business arrangement subtly developed into one of the most talked about behind-the-scenes tales in contemporary hip-hop. Blueface was supposed to be protected and guided by Wack100. Instead, it appears to be a deliberate, slow play in which significant sums of money were lost in plain sight. This breakdown explains how one of the culture's most prominent managers allegedly moved parts freely and with little effort to conceal it. Longtime Los Angeles music manager Wack100, whose real name is Cash Jones, is well known for his strong opinions, never-ending controversy, and habit of standing next to musicians in the middle of mayhem. Before entering the music business and managing musicians like Ray J and The Game, he established his reputation in the streets. Of all his business ventures, his relationship with Blueface stands out as being both highly lucrative and highly dubious. Born Jonathan Porter, Blueface was a young Los Angeles artist who became well-known simply by chance. He had little knowledge of contracts, management, or the real workings of the industry, despite the rapid success of his viral song Oceanania. He lacked protection, training, and polish. He was exposed to someone with significantly more experience because he was only a streetwise artist, making noise while learning in real time. Blueface had no management, no legal staff, no true structure, fast-moving funds, and no defined strategy at the moment. Blueface claims that Wack intervened forcefully at that point, pressuring meetings and exerting influence as though he already had the upper hand. According to reports, Wack100's daughter introduced him to the song after hearing Oceanania. Shortly afterward, Wack made direct contact and insisted on a sit-down. At first, Blueface showed no interest. Wack were hesitant after a brief search revealed public drama, contentious disputes, and unpleasant headlines associated with his name. Later on, Blueface acknowledged that Wack's notoriety caused unease, particularly considering their disparate social groups. Wack persisted in phoning and emailing despite this, insisting for an urgent meeting at his home. By then, Blueface was taking care of everything by himself. While labels like Atlantic Records and Empire Records hovered nearby, still attempting to comprehend him, he was scheduling performances, filming films, and operating his business on his own. Then everything changed in a single moment at a park in his neighborhood. Wack made another call, dispatched a car, and Blueface went this time. Blueface was immediately struck by the sight of Wack100's mansion. Success was shown by the home, the way of life, and the general ambience. Later, Blueface revealed that he was persuaded Wack could advance his career simply by the sight of someone who obviously possessed wealth and influence. That was a deliberate setting. The mansion was a part of the pitch, not merely a place to live. Before any business talks had started, every aspect of that encounter was intended to impress and drop Blueface's guard. After that, things happened quickly. Before Blueface showed there, Wack had already printed and prepared the contract. There was only paperwork waiting to be signed, no lengthy discussion, no precise definition of words, and no thorough breakdown, raising grave concerns about how hurried and uneven the process actually was. It was immediately followed by the most awkward moment. Wack's wife was asked directly by Blueface if she would advise her own son to sign the same contract. Yes, she replied. In Blueface's opinion, a mother would never lead someone into a dangerous position, so that answer was more important than anything else in the room. That one response changed everything and gave the transaction a sense of security. Blueface signed right away based just on that occasion. There was no attorney. There was no time to go over the documentation, no explanation of the long-term effects, and no comprehension of what he was committing himself into. He trusted his surroundings and those in his immediate vicinity, especially because they were obviously more powerful and experienced than he was.
I always knew Blueface was pretty stupid. I'll tell you why. Blueface is signed to Wack100 and managed by Wack100. Let me tell you how this works. When you sign to a label, they take at least half of it. Then you're getting managed by the guy who owns the label. So of your 50% that you're getting, or less than 50%, he's still taking at least 20% of that too.
As time went on, the actual details emerged. It was more than a typical management agreement. It was a bundle that included both management and a record deal. This implied that WAC was receiving two payments from the same source. First, a huge 50% cut straight from music profits, followed by a 20% management charge from the remaining funds. Such a configuration is incredibly uncommon. DJ scholars dissected it in public and called it double dipping. Because it clearly creates a conflict, artists typically avoid signing both arrangements with the same person. Record deals normally share revenues more evenly after expenditures are paid, whereas managers typically receive between 15 and 20%. There was a lot of bias in this agreement. Wack had every kind of leverage thanks to the framework, while Blueface took the brunt of the long-term harm. Furthermore, this was not a brief circumstance. The percentage never ceased because these contracts span years and numerous projects. The money continued to move in a single direction. In the present, the outcomes are difficult to overlook. Blueface had very little money when he was released from prison. The predicament is made worse by the fact that even his restaurant business has failed to take off, despite platinum albums and widespread publicity. Building anything over the long term is practically impossible when an artist only maintains about 30% of their profits. Businesses fail, investments stagnate, and future plans fail before they are even initiated. According to reports, Wack100 has been receiving the majority of Blueface earnings. There are even rumors that Blueface might even have to give up his home. That in and of itself demonstrates how detrimental such agreements may be to an artist's future. The musician is left struggling to make ends meet while Wack continues to boast about his opulence and comfortable lifestyle. The fact that Blueface is still bound by the contract further exacerbates the situation. These agreements are made to be hard to break unless an artist is prepared to shell out a lot of cash for fines and court cases. Here, age also matters. When this occurred, Blueface was just out of the streets, just in his early 20s, had no formal business experience, and had no real protection. Because of the experience gap, an experienced player had the ideal opportunity to craft a contract that greatly favored them. There is more to this tale than just one artist. It draws attention to a larger trend in the industry where young talent is coerced into unjust contracts by ostentatious lifestyles, pressure to meet deadlines, and subliminal psychological manipulation. In retrospect, the warning indicators were clear. Layered agreements, contracts drafted prior to actual discussions, and no room for legal review. Using family influence to create a sense of trustworthiness was one of the most deliberate strategies. That isn't advice. That's comfort wrapped around pressure. Wack can contend that he improved Blueface's career, but it is unacceptable to take nearly 70% of someone else's income. A partnership does not exist when one individual has complete control over the finances, direction, and decision-making. Control is that. And the artist bears the cost when control reaches that level. Millions that ought to have remained with the originator are lost over time. Simple is the lesson that strikes the hardest here. Never sign anything without first having it reviewed by a lawyer. It doesn't matter how smooth a person's voice is or how wealthy they appear. It is not optional to seek independent legal counsel. There is no 70% cut associated with genuine mentoring. Blueface believed he could achieve that level simply by signing because of the illusion produced by the mansion, the lifestyle, and the flex. How that wealth was created was something he was unable to see at the time. One success story was not the source of Wack100's funding. It resulted from distributing enormous percentages among several artists. Deals like these cause far more harm than just financial loss. Artists who are unable to retain their earnings are unable to make long-term investments in their families, communities, or anything else. People end up stuck in the same loop with no genuine growth because of this. The warning indicators would have been obvious to any competent entertainment lawyer. Extreme percentages, zero cooling-off periods, and merged management and record deals are common industry red flags. That whole setup would have been renegotiated or shut down entirely with even little industry expertise. Blueface would have realized that double-dipping at that level is abnormal and unquestionably unfair if he had been aware of usual transaction arrangements. Additionally, there was a false sense of urgency and pressure to sign right away, which left little time for thorough investigation, clear thinking, or pertinent questioning. In the meantime, Blueface already had genuine interest from record firms like Atlantic Records and Empire Records, which were respectable choices that probably would have put him in a much better position. Rather, he is currently coping with the fallout. Tight money, little leverage, and important assets at stake. His efforts contributed to the accumulation of wealth for someone else, while the individual, on the other side, keeps reaping the rewards of his achievement. However, the pact prevented him from creating the same future for himself. The only practical choice at this point is to continue operating under the same conditions and hope that volume will somehow make up for that tiny 30%. That is a harsh reality because the odds are already against you, regardless of how hard you try. And the financial burden is not the only one. It also affects the mind. It gradually wears you out to get up each day knowing that the majority of your work is supporting someone else's lifestyle. Motivation wanes. There is a decline in creativity. That weight accumulates rapidly. The artist becomes trapped in survival mode rather than concentrating on development, artistry, and long-term vision. When the payout seldom reaches you, every song, appearance, and action feels less fulfilling. That kind of arrangement eventually saps enthusiasm, dulls drive, and replaces it with mistrust and frustration. Other artists are listening. Situations such as these subtly become industry case studies. They impart knowledge without requiring somebody to explain it. It demonstrates why patience, legal knowledge, and appropriate representation are so important. It no longer appears that Blueface and Wack100 have a positive manager-artist relationship. It feels more like control than teamwork. The artist is intended to be employed by actual managers. They create leverage, safeguard money, and open doors. They don't set up transactions in which they benefit no matter what happens. This agreement seems like a 360-degree bargain on steroids. Furthermore, the majority of individuals do not even approach taking 70%. According to industry norms, that is excessive. Deals like this send a dangerous signal if they become commonplace. It conveys to aspiring artists that harsh terms might be justified by desperation. These circumstances also don't remain stuck on paper. They cause long-lasting animosity, disrupt interpersonal connections, and undermine trust. In the beginning, Blueface probably viewed Wack as a mentor and protector. It's a painful wake-up call to realize that trust came with a lot of conditions. Families suffer when artists are unable to accumulate wealth via their own achievements. Long-term prospects, future goals, and the individuals who depend on them are all negatively impacted. The mental toll becomes inevitable when you combine financial strain, legal pressure, and a sense of being stuck. Stability, not continual concern, is what success is meant to provide. It is more difficult to justify exerting maximal effort when the majority of the gain goes elsewhere. The industry continues to avoid the truth. Basic education could avert a lot of poor decisions. Before signing anything, it can save careers to understand contract language, standard percentages, and long-term ramifications. Peer advice is also important. The only people who are prepared to caution newbies about quiet traps and bargains that appear nice on the surface, but eventually turn toxic are frequently artists who have already weathered the industry. Blueface suffered the most at the center of it all. A young artist should have been positioned for long-term security after gaining popularity with a viral record. Rather, that moment served as the basis for the prosperity of someone else. The true issue is that this is not a single poor choice. The wrong people are consistently rewarded by this system. It extends beyond a single boss or contract. Artists who are still learning about power, influence, and money have long been exploited by seasoned businesspeople in the profession. Stories like this will continue to occur until responsibility, transparency, and education are accepted as norms. Same result, new faces. The lesson is straightforward. Verification is necessary, but trust is acceptable. If the fine print is overlooked, a deal that seems life-changing now could gradually drain millions over time. Something significant will emerge if Blueface's predicament encourages even one artist to take a moment, reflect, and safeguard their future. This is more than just a single artist or manager when you take a step back and consider the big picture. It has to do with how the system perpetuates the same errors. Blueface's experience demonstrates how, If the business aspect is not managed correctly from the beginning, success can soon become a long-term burden. Particularly when a viral event occurs, the industry responds quickly. When money arrives and attention grows, everyone in the artist's immediate vicinity has answers. It's precisely that speed that exposes young talents. It is impossible to slow down, analyze motivations, or completely comprehend what is being signed when things proceed too quickly. Bad transactions flourish there. The wasted potential is what makes this scenario even more painful. Early on, Blueface had significant leverage, visibility, and momentum. They rarely open those windows. That energy could have been transformed into long-term security with a correct framework, equitable direction, and perseverance. Rather, the majority of the value was taken away from the one who earned it. This has nothing to do with downplaying the importance of management. Artists do require protection, strategy, and direction. However, guidance should empower rather than ensnare. Instead of silently draining the artist's ownership, a true team tries to increase it. Deals that are designed to benefit one party regardless of the result are not supportive. Extraction is what that is. The fact that pressure does not always appear hostile is another unsettling reality. It appears friendly at times. It may appear as comfort, assurance, or mentoring at times. People cease asking inquiries when trust and urgency coexist. The power dynamic is irrevocably altered once the paper is signed. The escape doors are already closed before the artist realizes what is going on. Education is important because of this. Law degrees are not necessary for artists, but awareness is. Everything can be changed by being aware of conventional percentages, comprehending the distinction between ownership and management, and seeing warning signs. Years of harm can be avoided with only one unbiased advisor. The psychological impact of such circumstances is frequently overlooked. Artists' creativity, mobility, and perception of the industry are all impacted when they feel financially constrained. Instead of being a means of expression, music becomes a duty. Hustle becomes a means of survival. People gradually become burnout by that adjustment. The prevalence of these tales exacerbates the situation. They simply aren't always available to the public. There are numerous unreported cases occurring for every well-known one. Artists losing control, falling behind financially, and blaming themselves for deals they never fully understood. The mechanism is safeguarded, and the cycle is maintained by that silence. Transparency is important because of this. It is not an attack to discuss such circumstances. It has to do with revealing patterns. Smarter discussions are compelled when artists witness actual cases of poor contracts unfolding over time. It urges people to take their time rather than seize the first dazzling opportunity that presents itself. Labels, managers, and industry veterans are also accountable. It is never appropriate to use experience as a weapon against a younger person. It needs to be utilized as a safeguard, particularly when a poor choice can have lifelong repercussions. Building just systems that benefit everyone, not just the person in charge of contracts and decision-making, is the essence of true leadership. The message is straightforward and important for up-and-coming artists who are seeing things unfold. Talent is insufficient on its own. Virality is insufficient. Continuous grinding is also insufficient. Success can potentially make you worse off than when you first started if you don't have protection. Your future will be shaped by the agreements you make early on, not by the tunes that make you famous. You don't have to miss opportunities because you're taking your time. It entails picking the appropriate ones. A genuine opportunity doesn't vanish in an instant. A hasty signature is all it takes for a terrible deal to hound you for years. That's how careers are confined before they've even begun. Blueface's predicament serves as a cautionary tale, but it can also be useful. It matters if it makes even a small number of artists slow down, seek legal counsel, and insist on fair terms. It matters much more if it initiates genuine discussions that drive the industry toward higher standards. It takes time for the industry to adjust. However, when people stop disregarding the harm, things do change. Success without ownership is not freedom, as such stories serve as a reminder to everybody. It's just another way to exert power. The cycle will keep repeating with fresh faces, And the same results unless artists are taught that lesson early.